everyone. Welcome to my CNC about aggregating algae invades. And my name is Gaby, and I'm an intern with OC Habitats. And I'll be talking about the algae invasion in Newport Bay. To start off, we'll be talking about what algae is. And so algae they play a significant role as producers in the aquatic environment and ecosystems, and they're microscopic forms of life suspended in the water columns in the ocean or in lakes or any body of water. And they're the main component of phytoplankton as they contribute to the food base of most marine ecosystems. And they range in a variety of sizes from microscopic Micromona species to giant kelps that reach 60 meters in height and in length. And as mentioned before, they are oxygen producers. And so they use photosynthesis to kind of take in water and carbon dioxide to produce oxygen as a byproduct. And as similar to plants, they use the sunlight as an energy source to kind of produce food on their own, which is why they're considered producers. And that being said, do we think algae is a plant or an animal? What do you think they're classified as? So we got one answer saying plant or related to plants. And so the answer is that while they do contain chloroplasts and they do undergo photosynthesis like plants, they're not classified as plants nor animals. And so they're kind of their own kind of group of organisms. And there are several types of algae as well, including the red and green and euglenids and dinoflagellates. And scientists think that red and green algae evolved from endosymbiotic relationships with cyanobacteria. And so another reason why algae is not considered a plant is because they lack roots and stems and leaves, which is kind of symbolic of a plant. And so that's kind of what distinguishes them from plants. And to go over a little bit of the background, they were originally kind of originated from the Mediterranean. They were kind of being invasive there. And so they kind of started off in this museum where people used this algae called Caulerpa taxifolia for decorative purposes. And so this kind of happened in the 1980s where they used the plant, and then several years later, they actually dumped it into the Mediterranean Sea and for some reason, and that kind of started their spread and kind of invasion kind of on a global scale. And this is kind of like a fun little thing where they kind of escaped from this museum of Monaco. And so in the coast of California, they were found in Newport Bay in April of 2021. So it's fairly recent, and originally their kind of their scientific name is Caulerpa taxifolia, but they're actually also known as the killer algae because they're kind of being so detrimental to the environment. And as you can see on the left, this picture is kind of the scale of this algae kind of taking over the rock reefs and the local habitats. And this is kind of where the invasion started, and this is in Newport Bay. And so a little background about the taxifolia. The main reason why they're so invasive is because they're fast growing, and they are really destructive in the native vegetation, and they're able to secrete this toxin that a lot of marine organisms kind of avoid. And they are native to Florida and subtropical waters, and primarily found in those warmer areas. However, because they're so adaptive, they are able to kind of establish themselves in the coast of California, where the water is cooler than other areas where it might reside, such as Florida or Australia. And so this is an example of an algal bloom. And so algal blooms are kind of caused by urban runoff, and urban runoff is basically like water from our inner land kind of flowing into the ocean. And urban runoff can contain nitrogen or phosphorus that is kind of used as tools for these algae to grow and to kind of flourish. And so with increased urban runoff that comes from fertilizers or animal waste or anything like that, that kind of contributes to algal blooms that can really intensify the scale of the invasion of these plants. And so with algal blooms, they kind of take up a lot of the oxygen in the water and kind of deplete the oxygen in the water. And because of this, a lot of the marine organisms like fish or sea turtles or marine mammals, they kind of, the oxygen that they need to survive kind of gets depleted. And they also don't have any known predators outside of its native tropical range, which means that they have no predators to really kind of control their population growth. They can just grow on their own, and there's nothing kind of stopping them. And so also, they don't pose any human health risks, but it is important to note that the marine organisms living in the area are facing detrimental effects because of this. And so the potential causes of the algal invasion is, like mentioned before, the aquarium. They're used as a decorative plant in aquariums. And so people, sometimes it may be improperly disposed in like lawns or storm drains, and that can, those storm drains, they kind of directly lead into the ocean, and that's what makes it, it gives it a little head start in trying colonizing in different areas, because they're so, even a tiny fragment of them can start a whole colony, and their basic needs are very minimal, so it's really easy for them to establish. And any activities like swimming or boats can also spread these algae, because they may attach to the boats and just get spread wherever the boats are traveling. And the damage caused by this algae can be very detrimental and long-lasting due to its hardy nature and ability to kind of expand really quickly. And so, like mentioned before, the potential causes are because the urban runoff or the aquarium waste are deposited through storm drains, which are kind of directly led into the ocean. And as you can see, normally sewers would go through this filtration process in sewage plants, and then they would be filtered before entering the ocean. However, storm drains are kind of a direct pathway into the ocean, so it's important to keep not only algae, but also pollutants or trash as well away from these storm drains. And this is also why pesticides are harmful. It's because if they're overused, they can end up in storm drains as well and kind of contribute to the effects of the marine ecosystem being damaged. And here we'll be taking any questions that you guys may have. So you guys can put them in the chat if you guys have any questions. And we'll wait a couple seconds for questions. Okay, so it seems like everyone is, oh, okay. Is there really a way to stop this? So we'll be covering this in the slides coming up, but there are eradication efforts being made right now, so we'll be covering this soon. Okay. So for the impacts and solutions of this event, so the impacts to our local habitats. So this is a diagram of the Newport Bay, and this is the diagram of the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. And so these are where the algae were first discovered in the coast of California. And first, I would like to reiterate the fact that this species is really hardy, like I said before, and they're really adaptive. So they can not only reproduce asexually, which means that they don't really need differentiated genders to reproduce. They can just reproduce on their own, which is really advantageous for kind of their purpose in growing and establishing itself in these areas. And it's kind of similar, or in these local habitats, like in the other areas in the Mediterranean, they may kind of invade local habitats and kind of displace native species of plants or marine animals. And kind of the common ones are like seagrass that may be displaced due to this algae. And for some impacts around the world, in the Mediterranean Sea, this algae has spread steadily after its introduction in 1984. And at the end of 2000, approximately 131 kilometers squared of benthnose had been colonized. And benthnose is like the level in the ocean that is kind of like a shallow area after the continental shelf. And that area has been colonized by this algae, as well as other coasts of countries. And it also kind of invaded in the Suez Canal and the Algarve beaches in Portugal. As you can see, that they kind of washed up up on shore as well. And in this map, you can kind of see the depiction of this invasive algae. Mostly in the coast of France, it's really spreading out much more than other areas. However, you can also see in Croatia and Sicilia and Italy, all those coasts are kind of being invaded by this algae as well. And when they're invading, they kind of invade through the seagrass and soft bottom habitats in these areas, which can have similar effects to what's happening in California as well. And so why should we care? And so on the left, you can see a depiction of a healthy seagrass community. You can see a lot of fish swimming through, and the seagrass gives them protection and shelter in terms of being kind of protecting themselves from predators or using it as their own home. But you can see on the picture on the right, the seagrass are invading, or the Caulerpa species are invading, and you can see the depletion of the seagrass community and how it's kind of taking over the original placements of the seagrass. And over time, it kind of just takes over everything, as you can see on the bottom right. So this is a depiction of a single Caulerpa algae, and yeah, you can just kind of look at it and identify it as an invasive if you see it anywhere in our local communities. And the next slide, these are some eradication efforts. And so one method that they used for eradication was to use these filtration systems that used extension tubes to remove the algae. So these divers would go in and they would identify the locations of these algae, where they're growing and where they're severely taking over. And then they would cover them, or they would remove them with the tubes, kind of sucking them into the tubes. And then they would go through, the algae would go through a filtration system that would get rid of them. But another method that they would use is to kind of cover the algae in black tarps. So as you can see, these divers are going in and they're covering them with black tarps, covering the algae in black tarps underwater, and then they're pumping in chlorine, and this allows the algae to kind of decay or chemically be removed. And this kind of leads to effects on the local and native marine species and plants. However, it's a much reduced effect compared to what would have happened if the algae was just left alone. It would have had much more detrimental effects, and it was really crucial for them to eradicate the algae in this point in time as quickly as possible, because this species is so invasive. And the team here, you can see being depicted, is the California Caulerpa Action Team, and they were responsible for eradicating and monitoring the areas of infestations and kind of making sure that this eradication effort was being successful. And on the left here, you can see two of the divers. On the picture in the middle, you can see two divers and a field manager kind of working together in this effort. And after the removal, they would continue to conduct surveys to make sure the algae is not regrowing and that the area is being properly managed. And the surveys were funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service. And Aside from government-led organizations, there are also some other organizations such as the OC Coastkeepers or the State Water Resources Control Board that are helping in this effort. And so they are nonprofit organizations that are kind of being led through volunteerism to help in this algae removal. And the OC Coastkeepers in specifically are helping to conduct the surveys that are used to identify the locations of the algae and in monitoring the surrounding coves just north of where the invasive species were located and first detected. And yeah. And so what can we do in terms of trying to play our part in reducing these algae invasions? So if you ever do decide to keep a pet fish or get an aquarium and start collecting fish, after you dispose of plants, you can keep in mind these two methods of proper disposal. The first method is to freeze the algae for at least 24 hours, and this makes sure that they do not regrow, even if they are exposed into bodies of water. And another method is to use chlorine. And so you can kind of submerge them in 10% chlorine solution, and this is kind of similar to the eradication method. And so chlorine is going to chemically decay the algae. And we can also prevent the algae invasions by educating others. So we can, whatever we learn from this slide presentation or doing outside research personally, we can educate our community, educate potential fish keepers or aquarium owners. Maybe you have like a niece or a nephew or a member of your community that is just starting out in collecting or getting a pet fish, and maybe they might not be as educated. And so you can educate them and remind them to use plants that are safe for the environment and plants that are not invasive, like the Caulerpa species, and kind of let them know of these disposal methods as well. And so as part of an extension of what we can do, some alternatives to aquarium plants that we can use are the Amazon sword or the African water fern that are environmentally friendly, and they are less likely to be to establish itself and be invasive like the Caulerpa taxifolia algae species, and also be aware of storm drains. Make sure not to dump any unknown fluids or aquarium water or anything like that, just to be aware of these drains that may be leading to the ocean. And we can also get involved by joining nonprofits or volunteering for nonprofit organizations to educate ourselves, and not only ourselves, but also be a part of the effort in improving situations and in educating others about certain events like these. And an example is OC Habitats or OC Coastkeepers that we can join, that are organizations local to our Orange County. And you can also spread the word through social media or through volunteering efforts, like mentioned before. And to finish off, why should we care? So as you can see, this is a food web. And so it kind of depicts that everything is connected in our environment and ecosystem. So from algae that starts here, limpets eat algae, and limpets are eaten by starfish or octopus, and so forth. It kind of cycles, and each one is kind of benefiting from each other. And so you can see how everything is interconnected. And this is a depiction of an energy pyramid. And so algae is located here where the primary producers are. So this might be kind of surprising, taking into account that we just went over why this algae species was so invasive and so harmful, but they are actually foundational to the marine biome. And so they're really extremely important for the sustaining of the marine ecosystem. However, it's in cases where they are not native to the area, where their natural predators are non-existent. That's where it starts to become a problem. But in areas where they're native, like Florida, they are foundational and they are crucial for the stability of the pyramid. And so you can see how these primary producers provide food for primary consumers and intermediate predators and top predators and so on. So if you could imagine a scenario where any of these primary producers are gone, then it would deplete the resources available for the primary consumers and the primary predators or the top predators. So it would essentially just disrupt the entire food pyramid. And yes, there are some questions. How long will they monitor this to ensure they got it all? So in terms of monitoring, like these local organizations are always monitoring our oceans and the coast of California. So I would say they're always keeping an eye on it. However, because this species is so fast growing, I would say they would, or yes, I'll just leave it at that. They would always be keeping track of what's happening in our environment. And yes, they would always be monitoring the areas. And the second one is, you mentioned that even a very small fragment can create a problem in the ecosystem. How does someone ensure these tiny fragments don't get into the ecosystem? So these tiny fragments can be from the algae itself that are visible to us to extremely small microscopic fragments. So it's more of just trying to be mindful of where we're disposing of things, like if we do have aquariums, or where we're disposing of in a general sense. Like we are always mindful of where we're disposing of our waste, right? So in a similar sense, we want to make sure we're not doing things that are that can lead to these things. So being aware of storm drains and being aware of urban runoff, and where these storm drains lead to, and specifically keeping plants that are less detrimental to the environment can also be a solution. And so now we can take any more questions if you guys have any more. And yes, we'll just wait a couple seconds.
So Gabby, I was the one who posed the question about the very small fragment, and you were mentioning the bleach and the freezing, and you were, you know, you were showing a baggie full of a plant that's actually, you know, something you can handle. But if someone is cleaning out their aquarium, and you know those small fragments are in their aquarium, and they, you know, they dispose of that water down the drain, is that an appropriate place? You know, if they've taken out the big pieces, and you know, I don't know that you want to put bleach in your aquarium, because you know remnants of bleach could potentially hurt the species that live in them. So I guess that was my question, was how can you be sure to not contaminate, you know, the system? You know, where can you, you know, if you were, there's no way to control those little micro. So is the only real solution is just not using them?
Well, actually, this species is actually banned, and it's actually illegal in the US right now. So it would be highly unlikely that someone would have this species in their household right now. But if they do have it, I did read something about flushing it down the toilet is also an option, because um, toilet water is kind of filtered through waste plants. So that's when they are kind of disposed of through toilets, then they are less likely to survive that filtration process. So
Right. Okay,
flushing it
great.
down the toilet is an option.
Because during, when, you know, sewage gets treated in 3 different phases: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So yeah, there's quite a lot of things that it goes through in order to make it safe again, to either, you know, for I think the water that's in the purple valves, which is recycled water, goes only through the secondary phase, and then the third one. So I would be curious, that would be an interesting to find out if the secondary is enough, but they're saying it is. So
Mhm.
I guess that was my question, was if you have to dump the water, and you know, where is the best place to do it? It sounds like the toilet is the best place to do it.
Mhm.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? We lost a couple of our high schoolers, it looks like. So okay, well, I think then we can wrap it up.
Okay. So first, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and you guys can find out more about us through our website at ochabitats.org, or you can also find us through our social media at ochabitats, or you can call us through our phone number, or email us through our email. And yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.